I used to hate One Piece, but then I got back into it, and now I love it again. Hey everybody, I'm DJ, aka Mushroom Man, and today, we're gonna be a little negative. You always see on YouTube people making videos like, oh, I love One Piece, or how I got into One Piece, and all these different things, you know, praising the show. I love it too, but I remember literally earlier this morning, I was asleep and then I just woke up and I was like, oh my God, I forgot that there was a point in my life where I just didn't like One Piece anymore. This video will be split into 3 different sections: how I got into One Piece growing up, and then at a certain point in my life, how I kind of fell off a bit, and then at the end, like how I got back into it and how it inevitably became my #1 favorite anime of all time. As you can see by the fact that now it is tattooed on my arm, there is no going back. So I can't remember the exact moment to when I started watching One Piece and how I discovered it and all that, but my earliest memory of watching One Piece or discovering it was, I vaguely remember a time where it was like me sitting down eating McDonald's hotcakes and just like watching the 4Kids version of One Piece, and like I think around then they were on the Syrup Village arc. So that was like my earliest memory of watching One Piece for the first time as a little kid. And then eventually a few years later, I started watching, like, this is like late elementary, early middle school, when Funimation was going on Toonami. I was watching One Piece via the Funimation dub, where it wasn't censored and they actually had like the voice acting, which, here's the thing, I genuinely think that the Funimation dub is pretty good. Do I think it's better than the sub? Not necessarily, just because of, you know, the having to say these lines that, you know, you normally wouldn't say in the English language that kind of sound off or awkward, or just like few moments where you can clearly tell that they're not putting as much effort into saying the line as the Japanese voice actors are in comparison. But overall, I think that the dub is pretty good. When I was first watching One Piece, they only had 206 episodes dubbed exactly. That was the end of the G8 arc. I remember when I was first watching One Piece, just being so memorized by all these different things. I remember I absolutely loved Alabasta and the Skypiea arc, which was crazy to learn that a lot of people didn't like it or just straight up skipped that arc. I'm like, what are you talking about? Skypiea was awesome. Like, I loved it the very first time that I watched it. But yeah, I remember for the longest, they only had 206 episodes dubbed, and I would constantly check every single day, once a week, whatever, to like see like, is there more episodes? Is there more episodes? I like look online, just like see when there's gonna be more episodes. And this was at the time, because nowadays, you know, the simulcasting dub, where like the dub is like an episode or 2 right behind the subbed version or whatever. Like, dubbing is now a lot quicker, which is cool for as a consumer. But at the time when I was growing up, like, it would take years and years until like past the release of an anime for there to be a dub for it too. So I remember, like, for a while the One Piece dub only had 206 episodes, whereas at the time, I believe One Piece, the Japanese version, the subbed version, was like in the middle of Marineford. So after a while, I just said, screw it, I'm just going to continue with the show via the subbed version. So I watched it, continued it, I absolutely loved it. Water 7 and Enies Lobby were amazing. I was like, dude, this is peak One Piece. This is fantastic. This is great. And then Thriller Bark was pretty good. At the time, I didn't really like Thriller Bark that much, but it was still really good, especially, you know, near the end when Kuma appears. Like, everything with that is like mind-blowing. Saba Odi was like, what? This is crazy. And like, honestly, I want to be honest, with Saba Odi, I really liked it, but for some reason, I don't know why, I just stopped watching One Piece for a tiny bit. Like, literally the last episode that I saw at that point, Kid and Law were fighting the pacifistas, and then like it took all of them together to beat one of them, and then the episode ends with another one showing up and then just like charging at them. I remember that was like, for a moment, I like stopped watching One Piece for a little bit after that, because I was kind of burnt out. I like binged so much of it and all that. This is kind of embarrassing to say, but didn't watch the post-war arc only because, looking at the thumbnails on Crunchyroll, I genuinely thought it was filler. Oh, I was a dumb kid in like 8th grade or whatever when I watched this. I remember there was like a big deal about like, oh, the time skip, da 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 da, and all that, like, is gonna happen. That's when I started to watch One Piece week to week when the anime was airing. Like the Return to Saba Odi, Fishman Island, and Punk Hazard. I was watching those on a weekly basis, which goes into why I stopped watching One Piece, because once the time skip hit, the pacing just got worse. I really didn't like the art style. I feel like the art style in between Return to Sabaody and Punk Hazard was just not good. Like, I really didn't like it. And just like at the time, I was enjoying One Piece, watching it once a week, watching Fishman Island. But like Punk Hazard was around the time where I could see myself clearly just being like, okay, all right, it's really slowing to a crawl. But because I mean, even Ennis Lobby and Marineford had their problems, but with like the pacing and all that, but the story itself was so good that it kept me invested in what was going on. But oh my god, Punk Hazard, I was starting to lose it. The problem was like they would stretch it out, like just like long scenes of them just staring at each other, walking, or just like attacks taking forever. Like literally the end of Luffy versus Caesar, like the Grizzly Magnum when Luffy beats Caesar in the manga, it's just like one hit, done, over. But in the anime, they extended it and made it like super long for no reason. Like Luffy had the advantage, which makes sense because it's the beginning of the time skip. Like Luffy should not be struggling so much in these first couple arcs after the time skip. But then like in the anime, because they're just like, oh shit, we still have like 8 minutes left in the episode, we gotta extend this. So they just like made Caesar, I guess, being able to hold off Luffy's attack and just like make it seem like they're on equal ground, which is like, no, that's not how it works. So that was annoying. And like honestly, going back to Fishman Island, I didn't appreciate Fishman Island my first time watching it nearly enough, because again, I was like more thinking like, oh my god, this is taking forever. And then my final breaking point was Dressrosa. The beginning of Dressrosa was the moment where I was like, I'm done with One Piece. Specifically the anime. It's because the anime is what made me fall off. I never bothered to read the manga or whatever, because for me personally, with consuming something, I prefer visual, I prefer animation, because I always felt like, you know, the anime adaptation of a manga, I always felt like it's supposed to enhance the experience of reading the manga, you know, like with the characters can now move, the characters can talk, you know, the cool fights, colors, music, and all these things. I feel like adding all these things is supposed to, in my opinion, enhance the experience of reading the manga. That's how I always felt like an anime adaptation is supposed to do. It's supposed to take this thing that you already love and make it better via the anime adaptation by adding all these extra things to it. The anime adaptation of One Piece, specifically for me, in between Return to Sabaody and the beginning of Dressrosa, I was like, I hate this. Again, it's the pacing is what was the issue, the padding, extending scenes and making them so long. Like I remember specifically like the moment to where I was like, I'm done with One Piece, to was like there was a scene to where when we first meet Fujitora, you know, they're at the casino or whatever. The fact that I remember that is crazy. There's a scene to where Fujitora and Zoro like see each other. Oh no. And Fujitora is like slowly, and I mean slowly, walking up to Zoro, and just like, I remember that scene was taking so long for it to happen, of just like Fujitora just like with this cane going up to Zoro and then be like, excuse me. And then continues walking. I'm just like, dude, all right, I'm done. Even though I stopped watching One Piece, I never truly hated it. I was just tired of it. And so I would always still keep up with the series a little bit, just like watching the episode previews, just like, okay, what's going to happen next? And, you know, it's like still trying to keep up in the loop, but there was like a long period of time where I just never fully watched an episode of One Piece. I would just like watch the episode previews and watch the highlights of the episode. Like, what was the best moment? I mean, that's literally what I did with Dragon Ball Super.
What?
Until the Tournament of Power, I don't think I watched, and like the very first episode or two, I don't think I watched a full episode of Dragon Ball Super. I never read the manga either, but I would always like, you know, see what's going on in the story by the episodes, and like also watching One Piece YouTubers reviews for like, you know, Sawyer 7 Mage, Chibi reviews, King of Lightning, Rogers Base, a little bit of teching, like guys like that, just like, you know, seeing what's going on in the manga. Like I'm still keeping up with the story and still, you know, kind of invested in what's going on, but I never read the manga myself or watched any of the anime episodes. So like I knew what was going on, I just didn't know the details, the finer details of like why can Luffy all of a sudden, what the fuck is Gear Fourth? You know, things like that. So yeah, so for a few years, like around Dressrosa was when I stopped watching One Piece, but again, I would check in every once in a while. It wasn't until the ending of Whole Cake Island in the manga / the beginning of the Reverie arc is when I slowly started to get back into it a little bit, because there was a long time where they just like stopped doing Toonami on TV, and then it came back maybe a year after it came back. They said like, hey, the One Piece is coming back. We dubbed more episodes. We're continuing from where we left off. So if you've never seen One Piece, you're kind of screwed, because they're literally starting on episode 207, which is the beginning of Long Ring Long Land. And I hate that I know that. And what's funny too is like, I remember when it first came back, I asked my mom if she would want to watch it with me, like, you know, have someone to watch it with me, because at the time growing up as a kid, I didn't really have a whole lot of friends who were into anime, let alone One Piece. So it was just pretty much me by myself. And she's gotten into it too. Like I remember there were a few times where we'd like watch some episodes and she'd be like, can we watch another one? Can we watch another one? Can we watch another one? And I remember at the time I was kind of just like, oh my God, okay, another episode. And yeah, I remember she was like really invested in what was going on with the NS Lobby arc. So like, yeah, my mom has seen from episode 207 to the ending of Marineford, like right at the beginning of the post-war arc, like the very first episode of the post-war arc, I think she saw. For me, I prefer to watch anime dubbed that came out around the time when I was a kid, and the late 90s to like 2010. And then for some reason, like everything after that, I prefer to watch it only subbed. It's a weird thing. Like with One Piece, Romance Dawn to the ending of the post-war arc, I will watch dubbed. After that, like Return to Saba Odi and then up, I'm like sub only. Why? I don't know. I'm weird like that. The ending of Reverie to the beginning of Wano is when I started to be more of a manga kind of guy, where because I remember like the beginning of Wano, I would like read the chapters once a week. One Piece is getting insane. It really feels like it's like starting to lead up to the end game and all that. So I was like, okay, let's really get into One Piece. Let's really start getting back into One Piece now. But even then, for the longest time, I still wasn't convinced that One Piece was my #1 favorite anime of all time. At the time, that crown was given to JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What truly brought me back into One Piece was making content and starting a YouTube channel about anime and stuff like that. Like, you know, my most popular video, 1 second from every episode of One Piece, to where I literally went through all the episodes of One Piece. So, you know, after a certain point, I did skim it and all that to make it quicker, especially since I know what's going on in the story. But going through all of One Piece and like seeing all these moments again, just like my childhood, just like starting from East Blue, going to Alabasta, up to Skypiea, I was like, oh my God, the memories, it's so good. Once I got to the arcs where I fell off, like now that it's all available, it's not once a week, I start to enjoy it a lot more, you know, like Dressrosa. Going through Dressrosa, even though I went through like pretty quickly for that video, I was actually pretty interested in what's going on. I was like, oh my God, this is actually really good. But yeah, and like Whole Cake Island too, like now that it was all available, it became a much better experience. The thing that sucks with doing that video was that doing the 1 second One Piece video is that because of that, now I know the exact episode when certain moments happen. Like for example, Zoro defeats Mr. 9 and learns Zoro defeats Mr. 1 and learns how to cut steel on episode 119. I hate that I know that. And then Luffy defeats Crocodile on episode 126. Zoro defeats Kaku on episode 300. So that means that Sanji defeated Jabra 2 episodes prior on episode 298. I hate that I know that. Doing One Piece content has fucking ruined me. And then like even more like really solidifies like, no, One Piece 100% is my #1 favorite anime, is doing these comedic reviews, going back and like rewatching all these different arcs, like seeing the very beginnings, rewatching it again, and like really made me appreciate the story more and the characters and everything, and especially like, you know, knowing what's going to happen and like how things eventually lead up to the later points in the story. I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Like I love Oda's Like, one of the biggest things that I love about One Piece is the world building with all these characters, like seeing all these different locations, seeing how everything is connected in some crazy way and all that. Like, it's great. So it's kind of funny, like my journey with, I liked it as a kid growing up, and then as a teen, preteen, I was kind of like, One Piece, lame, okay. Kind of fell off, and then now as an adult, I'm like, bro, One Piece is fucking amazing. So that's sort of my story with One Piece and like my downfall of the series or whatever and all that. So yeah, let me know what you guys think of these types of videos. I probably won't do a whole lot of these kinds of videos only because I really don't have, that's probably the only story, to be honest, that I have related to One Piece or anime or whatever of this vein that I could talk about a bunch. But I'll also be interested to know like your guys' journey with One Piece. How did you get into it? Like, when did you start watching it? Did you fall off? Did you initially hated it, or did you love it like right from the get-go? Like, when did you start, like around, you know, like what arc was coming out that you started to watch it or whatever? I'd be interested to know. But yeah, that's about it. Thank you guys very much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, the whole YouTube shebang, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.